I didn't say a word when the HOA president screamed about unauthorized landscaping and accused me of trespassing on my own soil. I just slid a thin, folded packet across the table during the board meeting. It was stamped with a federal eagle and dated decades before the subdivision even existed. The attorney on their side reached for it, scanned the first page, and froze. His lips parted, but nothing came out. The president leaned over to see what had drained the color from his face. And when she read the words federally protected forestry easement, permanent and irrevocable, she slumped back in her chair. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. In that silence, they knew they had lost. The irony was, I hadn't moved out here to fight anyone. I came because I wanted peace. My grandfather's old cabin sat on the edge of a ridgeline tucked into the pines, overlooking a slow, silver stream that curled down into the valley. He left it to me after he passed, and for years I told myself I'd come back and restore it. When retirement finally rolled around, I traded traffic and deadlines for quiet mornings with coffee on the porch, the scent of wood smoke in the air. And a couple acres where I could plant a garden, fish on weekends, maybe put some trees back where they'd once been logged. I wasn't looking for neighbors, or meetings, or politics, just space to breathe. The first notice came taped to my mailbox in bright orange, like some sort of scarlet letter. Violation. Unauthorized alteration of landscape. I thought it had been a mistake. I had planted 4 young pines along the edge of the gravel drive, saplings no taller than my shoulders. My grandfather used to say this land was happiest when it smelled like pine, and it felt like a way to keep him close. But the HOA letter claimed I was disrupting community aesthetics. I laughed at the absurdity, then shook my head. Wasn't worth getting angry over. The second letter wasn't as easy to brush off. It came certified mail, thick with legal jargon, threatening fines of $100 a day if I didn't remove all unauthorized plantings. They cited bylaws about uniform vegetation and approved species lists. I walked outside, stared at the saplings, barely clinging to life in the rocky soil, and wondered how on earth anyone could consider them a threat. I wasn't blocking anyone's view. I wasn't on their lawn. I wasn't even within sight of another house, unless you counted the faint roofline a quarter mile down the hill. I tried diplomacy. I wrote emails. I asked if there was a misunderstanding. I explained that the land I was planting on wasn't even part of their manicured common areas, but my own deeded parcel surveyed and staked generations ago. Responses came curt and cold. All landscaping changes must be pre-approved. Non-compliance will result in escalating fines. Failure to comply may trigger lien actions. They stopped signing the letters with names, just HOA board. So I tried meetings. I sat in their clubhouse while a handful of neighbors avoided eye contact, and one woman lectured me about community harmony. I offered compromise. Could I file an application? Submit the species list? Wait for approval? They smirked. The president said, "We don't approve trees. We've worked hard to keep this neighborhood clear. Your property is part of this community, whether you like it or not." That's when something shifted inside me. Not rage. It's not even hurt. Just a cold, steady focus. I stopped sending emails, stopped asking for compromise. Dead. I drove to the county records office and started pulling files. My grandfather had once mentioned an agreement with the Forest Service, back when logging companies were carving up the valley. Late nights, I sifted through brittle paper and microfilm. One found survey maps drawn in faded ink with lines marked permanent easement, Federal Reserve. I photographed every page. I ordered certified copies. I traced how the land had shifted through inheritance and sale, and how my grandfather had carved out protections for reforestation decades before. HOAs ever paved cul-de-sacs into the hills. More I dug, the more solid the ground beneath me felt. The easement wasn't just some clause. It was a binding, federally recorded protection that gave me not only the right, but the obligation to replant and maintain native forest. The HOA bylaws weren't just powerless in comparison. Were in direct violation of federal law. And the best part? Their own development permit from the 1980s included a line acknowledging the easement, They had known or should have known long before I ever put a spade in the dirt. Neighbors stopped waving. Some looked away. Word had spread that I was fighting the board, and nobody wanted to pick sides. My daughter called, worried. I was stressing myself sick. My soon-in-law suggested I just cut the trees down and avoid the fight. But every evening, I stood out there by those fragile saplings, and I remembered my grandfather's hands, rough and steady, planting fence posts. In the same soil, I wasn't about to undo his legacy, so I documented everything. Photos of the trees, copies of every letter, a journal of every knock on my door and every shouted threat across the property line. I wasn't building a fight. Was building a case. The night of the board meeting, I walked in carrying nothing but a folder. Expected me to argue, to beg, to explain myself. Instead, when the president launched into another tirade about known compliance, I set the folder on the table and slid it forward. Their lawyer, young and sharp-suited, picked it up. His eyes flicked back and forth across the page, then widened. The president leaned over, frowning until her face drained pale. "This is federal," the lawyer muttered. "Yes," I said. Calm, measured. A permanent forestry easement, recorded in 1954. It predates your subdivision by 30 years. It obligates me to plant and maintain native trees, which means every fine you've issued, every threat you've made, every letter you've sent is not only void, but illegal. Silence. You could hear the air conditioning click on. A few neighbors shifted in their seats. One man chuckled. Under his breath, the president tried to recover, stammering something about community standards, but I didn't need to argue. I pulled out the second page, a letter from the Regional Forest Service office, confirming the easement was still in force and reminding the HOA that any interference could result in federal penalties. It ended the discussion. After that, things moved quickly. The fines were rescinded. The letters stopped. The HOA lawyer quietly resigned. Within 3 months, the president herself stepped down. Nobody apologized outright, but I noticed how suddenly polite everyone became. They waved from their driveways again, or at least didn't glare when I drove past. The saplings took root, stretching taller every season, green against the skyline. Now, when I sit on the porch with my coffee and look out at the pines, I don't think about the board or the meetings or the threats. I think about how quiet it is again, how the air smells like my grandfather's land always should have. The HOA hasn't spoken to me in months. Maybe they're embarrassed. Maybe they're just waiting for me to slip up. Either way, it doesn't matter. The law is on my side. The trees are growing. The silence is mine.